I'm chair of the digital forum. Each event we try and have a new speaker talking on an interesting topic, and this week is no different. Or this week, it's not weekly. This session is no different. I'm delighted to be joined by both Ian Hilda and Noorie. I'm sorry, Noorie. Is it Sazan? How do you pronounce it?
It's Sazan.
Sazan, I do apologise. Noorie Sazan, both from Saffron. Saffron have been doing some really interesting work in the digital arena, and were recipients of a Nesta award and funding to help with the development of the area they're going to talk about in terms of employability. And what we have is a session where they're going to present what they did, some of the results, and tell us a little bit more about it. Now, as ever with these events, the idea is to make them interactive. So I'm looking at it, it looks like everyone's on muted, has been muted by default. But if you have questions, can you use, please, the chat facility? I'll keep an eye out as the session goes on, and we will either take breaks if they're quite a few obvious questions that make sense then, or we'll just have a Q&A session at the end. So I think with Teams, you can raise a hand if you want, or we have the question area, and I'm just going to type hello in there, and hopefully you can see it, and that's the area where you can tap in questions in the chat as we go through. So without further ado, Ian and Noorie, over to you, please.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Noorie. Sorry, Noorie. Thank you, Richard.
Well, thanks so much, Richard, and hello to everyone as well, and thank you for coming on this morning. You sharing some slides?
Yeah, so let me 2 seconds, bear with me, and then yes, I'll call up the presentation. So yes, definitely, Richard, I personally cannot actually sort of see what we're now because I'm driving here, but I'm going to hand over to Noorie to sort of get started, and then but if there is any sort of questions, do jump in, Richard. We'll rely on you if it makes sense, because yeah, it'd be great to make this a bit of an interactive sort of session as we go through it as well. So yes, Noorie, do you want to get us rolling?
So what we're here to discuss is, can digital solutions improve employment support outcomes? So as Richard said, both Ian and myself are from Saffron. We've been around for over 2 decades now, and we're a digital learning technologies provider. We provide bespoke content and delivery platforms for large corporates, the public sector, and also the not-for-profits. But more recently, we've been combining our understanding of how people learn and acquire skills, as well as our understanding of the behavioural sciences, to develop employment solutions. So we're accredited by the Learning and Performance Institute, and we were actually the first company to be accredited by them, and we're the only company to have been accredited continuously for the last 13 years. And we're also recognised by them globally as a top 15 provider. Let's move on now to the agenda. So as we all know, digital technology is moving at pace. But the question I think a lot of people have been wondering is, what role can it play in the employment journey for individuals, and especially those that are not regarded as being digitally savvy, or who are further away from the labour market, or have learning disabilities or learning difficulties. Whilst it's recognised that in order to achieve scale, we need to look at it seriously, I think there is a question mark in people's minds as to what can it actually do. And I think, you know, even the government, to be honest, are a little bit confused about it, because there were really vague references in terms of the recent Restart programme requirements to use digital. So there's a real uncertainty of how it can be utilised in an employment journey, not just as an enabler to scale and to manage programmes from an administrative perspective, or to house learning programmes, but can it actually increase performance outcomes? And that would be, you know, either changing, becoming more career adaptable, in other words, changing the kind of role that people are doing, accepting different roles, having become unemployed, or in also keeping that employment and continuously learning. So we're first going to explore that question. I'm going to give you a little insight into what we've discovered over the last few years in relation to digital versus face-to-face delivery. And then we're going to give you some background on why we were chosen as an innovator by Nesta, and were asked by them and the Department for Education to build the Create Your Own Future platform to test this very theory in relation to performance outcomes. And then we're going to show you the results of the pilot study we did, and that was evaluated by the Learning and Work Institute. So before we start, though, it might be interesting to understand which organisations currently use a digital employment support tool. And you can just say yes or no in the chat. But if you do say yes, please also indicate what's the real benefit of the tool.
So yeah, give you a couple of minutes there. I'm not actually seeing the chat, so anybody shout out, that would be great.
Yeah, I think there's a first no coming in. Don't be shy.
It's a windy Tuesday morning.
There's a couple more no's, I think, coming in.
Okay, well, that's interesting in itself, I guess. Yeah.
One yes. Gives the participant multi-channel choices. Yeah, brilliant.
Okay, yeah, interesting.
Yes. To an extent, improves reach, gives people more flexibility. Yeah, yeah. That's good. So we'll move on then. So in our experience, really, Saffron has always used insights from behavioural science to develop its learning and change management campaigns for clients. And our experience has been that the power of digital can actually go beyond the fact that it's available to 24/7 and potentially more accessible, or can scale in terms of numbers. We really believe that it has the power to make dramatic changes in all spheres. So prior to developing the employment solutions platform for Nesta and DFE, we've done a lot of other work in other sectors. So as an example of what I mean, we created a digital prevention platform for a charity called AVA, that's Against Violence and Abuse. And what was apparent through the research that was done by AVA was that school-age girls in particular were vulnerable at essentially accepting different forms of abuse, and that this was a growing danger. You'll remember all of the stories around grooming, etc., that were prevalent a few years ago. But educational practitioners at schools were really resistant to raising these issues to those that they suspected may be in danger or suffering from abuse. They're also unsure about reporting incidents. But more than that, AVA wanted us to create a platform that would get so much traction that it would enable systemic change in the way that pastoral services in schools were delivered. And what we produced, some very harrowing and very sensitive material, personal to practitioners, but also to the school children themselves. The result was that within 3 months, the number of users who felt very confident that they knew what abuse was more than doubled, from 19% to 47%. And the number of people who felt confident that they could make a difference in stopping violence against women and girls doubled, from 30% to 60%. And those who were aware of the legislation surrounding forced marriage and female genital mutilation jumped from 36% to 67%. Disclosures at schools where the programme was implemented increased by 300%. And in terms of systemic change, the platform content entered official government guidelines from the Home Office, the Department of Health, and the Department for Education, and now has been rolled out by hundreds of local authorities. It's also gained the support of the Times Education Supplement and the NSPCC. And we did another campaign for maternal mental health, and again, really, amazing positive results. And that gained 75 million in funding as a result of the change statistics that were generated. I won't go into all of that now based on time constraints, but please contact us for any of these case studies and many others. So moving on then to create your own future. We were challenged here by Nesta. We were awarded, we were named an innovator, and really thrown the challenge to build a tech solution that can build career adaptability and those kinds of skills to make people more career adaptable and motivate them to learn. And in that sector where essentially that workforce is most vulnerable to change. And this was extended to include those that were most affected by COVID-19 to make a career change, learn new skills that employers needed now. So we looked at, well, how do, what does good look like? What do people that are already career adaptable, what conditions have to exist for people to take that step? So we looked at the latest research on this, and we landed on the research completed by Mark Savikas, because it relates particularly to workplace trauma, the kind that we're going through now with the pace of digital disruption and COVID. And so what do people furthest removed from the labour market need to become career adaptable and take up learning and skills? Well, Savikas's research revealed that the higher the level of the 4 C's, as he calls them, the more career adaptable a person is. So concern, how much does the individual think about their future or is even aware of the issues? In other words, some of the people that we're talking about, when you say that your job at Morrison's is really likely to disappear, the response is potentially, well, I'll just get another job at Sainsbury's. So that level of concern in that situation isn't there. Control, how proactive is the individual? How disciplined or organised or deliberate are they in pursuing their goals? Do they feel in control of their own destiny, if you like? And then curiosity, how much does the individual explore their options and ask the question, what will or could I do? And then confidence, a big one. How much faith does the individual have in their ability to achieve these goals? Now, a 5th C, if you like, was added by Jennifer Brimrose of Warwick University, which was commitment. So what is the staying power of the individual and how resilient are they when they hit some bumps along the road, as all of us do? And after talking to more than 200 individuals in focus groups, we also put capability into the mix. Does the individual have the ability to make this change? And that could be external factors such as finance, time, or even cognitive capability to be able to do so. So we essentially used these 5 elements to create and develop in individuals and test that digital solution in the development of skills, confidence levels, and essentially what we're looking at really is about agency, the motivation to act and the resilience to do so despite any constraints. So this is essentially what Saffron's theory of change was about, and is essentially what we were hoping to test in the platform. Ian.
Okay, so thank you. So yes, so there's obviously some background there. I don't know, Richard, any questions there that we're sort of picking up at this point, or I can move along? I will give you 5 seconds to interrupt. If not, I'm going to jump right in.
I think carry on, please.
Brilliant. Okay, so that's obviously the background from both Saffron and indeed the theory behind what we were looking to do with Create Your Own Future. But very quickly, to actually show you the user experience so you know what we're talking about. So Create Your Own Future is an employability platform, and it's obviously designed to help people who have either lost their jobs or in danger of losing their jobs to get back into work, but also to get into a sustained career over a period of time. And it's designed to work alongside live advisors. There's many sort of exit entry points, intervention points where there'll be interactions with the live coaches as well. But essentially, it's a sort of series of technologies, all of which can be customized, broken out, repurposed. And they're all very much designed with the user in mind. And the very first technology within it is an AI-enabled video coach. So what actually happens is when the user first comes in to the platform, they are presented with a series of coaches from whom they can actually select, and that coach is actually then going to stay with them throughout the journey. So once they've actually gone through and they've chosen Javid or Susan or whoever it is, and they've read a little bit about them, watched a little bit of video, they then open up and start the actual sort of process. And it is built around having a conversation. So what actually happens in the initial instance is that the coach will ask them a series of questions. They can actually input text, they can input audio, they can input video at different points. There's also some sentiment analysis built in. So the coach will be asking them questions. How do you feel about this? How confident do you feel about this? So it's actually identifying those sentiments as well. But what's actually going to be happening there, as I say, it's a very interactive process for them. Lots of data being caught behind the scenes for the live advisors to gain insight from it. But for the actual user, very much determined as quite a naturalistic experience. And I'm going to very quickly show you a very, very quick video. It's just 20 seconds long, so that you can actually see what's actually happening there, so you can get a feel for this process with the video coach.
Hi there, I'm Mike. Thanks for choosing me as your mentor. I'll be your guide on this journey. So, what should I call you? You can either post a video, record yourself, or type your response.
So as I say, that's kind of the process is actually going through there. So, and that's going to happen, and the video coach is going to stay with them. It's a wraparound technology throughout the journey. But once we've got this established, we've gathered demographic information, we've explored some initial barriers to employment. So that might be digital skills, it might be motivation, it might be support networks. They're then going to go take them through a process. And the first thing they'll actually do is we'll do a skills assessment diagnosis. And this is based around a gamified piece where you've got 36 cards, and the user will actually assess themselves against am I undeveloped, adequate, competent, very competent. So they're going to rate themselves as they go through this process, and the coach is there and available to come up and give them guidance. Have you thought about this? Have you used it in this sort of area as well? So we're going to take that data, capture that data from the skills assessment, and it's then matched to jobs, career opportunities. It actually draws in the job profiles, 1,527 of them, draws in the job profiles from the National Career Service website. And it gives a quick sort of ready rec. Now you can sort of see, if you can see on the screen, the green dots are where skills have matched to it. The red dots are where there's a gap, and therefore it will also recommend further training potentially to address some of those sort of gaps. And you can search by general career areas, individual jobs. It will link out to the National Career Service website, so you can explore the jobs more. And indeed the training as well will link through to a catalogue of mostly AEB funded level 1 and level 2 training. And what you can also do here is actually integrate live job boards as well, and indeed put out feelers, and hopefully we can pick up the conversation sometime, Liz. But yeah, hoping that potentially to actually integrate Ask Seth now that that's up and running from ERSA as well. So I think that would be a great move forward. So anyway, so they'll go through this process. They'll be prompted to pin at least 2 jobs and at least 2 pieces of training. And then they move into an action planning stage. So what they're really doing here is being prompted to set up SMART goals as they work through this area. And there's a bit of a wizard, and the mentor's available to them again. And obviously what it's gathering here as well is a lot of information that is going to add for prompts, behavioural nudges. So reaching out to the individual, but also giving the user some insight on activities that the user has pinned there. And from there, it's then going to be an ongoing process. They're going to come back to those goals. They're going to want to revisit the careers, potentially revisit the skills assessment as well. So as they're coming back, they're going to arrive at this dashboard. So it's going to present them with all those activities. So the goals, the careers, how long you've been spending in all here. So this will be the central location as an ongoing thing. And very much determined and designed so that it's not just a one hit, it's not just about getting into work, but what we'd love to sort of see longer term, and we're seeing it now, is that this is something you maybe revisit. You know, you've got into work now, let's come and revisit that in a few months' time. How can you build the career? How can you actually add further training to it? What's your next move beyond that point? And as well as these processes, there's obviously additional resources within it. So links out to whatever might be appropriate or whatever sort of needed. This is as well, during that process, I mentioned the AI enabled video coach. They'll be having conversations at different times, checking in when people are struggling. They may actually refer the user here, we'll go and look here. There's some resources here that I know available to you. There's some training here that I know is available to you. Or they may recommend to reach out directly to that live advisor. So it's really about optimizing activities and taking some of the legwork out of it from that point of view. And the final thing, just to sort of touch on, and though it's not strictly part of the user experience, is that what obviously it's doing is gathering an awful lot of data behind there. So we've got the skills assessment, we've got that earlier diagnosis of what was actually happening, what are your sentiments there, what is your support network, as well as obviously basic demographic information, etc. So that's obviously going to give great insight to an advisor. And so via the back office tool, the reporting tool, they can run reports, can be set up to get alerts where people aren't engaged or they've got some goal coming up. So, you know, have they missed that goal? Have they not been coming into the platform for a while? So you can set up all that sort of thing. So a massive amount of data behind the scenes that's being gathered and helping and working for that live advisor so that they can actually plan their interventions to the optimum usage. And as well as the actual data for the individual use, obviously there's a massive amount of data being captured there, which really feeds into that whole improvement cycle, so big data analysis and what have you. And I'm going to hand back to Noorie now, because we've given you sort of a feel for what the platform's looking like from the user point of view. But what we wanted to share with you is, okay, what are we actually learning from that? What actually things are we seeing coming out of it now that we're off and running? So with that, I will hand back to you, Noorie.
Thanks. So what we're actually going to go through is our pilot data that we had of about 500 users. And what it's important to note here is, as Ian said, this wasn't supposed to be a standalone digital platform. It was supposed to work together with work coaches and learning advisors. But due to the pandemic and budget cuts, that human support wasn't available. So these statistics are about the digital only, and the digital user experience only. So what did we use in terms of that? Well, we used, as you can see there, the data from the platform. We used the user surveys that you know, people that were actually using the actual platform. We had focus groups all the way throughout, because we use a service design based approach, but we also had focus groups through the use of the platform. And then we also had user experience testing and had feedback from that as well. So what did that say about our pilot of circa 500 users? Well, first, there was pretty much broad selection in terms of gender and age. It's interesting that we gave the option to not to say what your gender was, and people did actively choose that as well. And then moving on in terms of the age as well, we can see that there's a broad range of ages there as well. And then moving on again, you can see that we also had a range of people with different educational backgrounds, although because we were in the middle of the first and second lockdowns, there was a large number of graduate unemployed, but also older workers unemployed that were, you know, suffering, if you like, and went into the platform. So having a look at the next slide, what's the significant findings amongst this group? So essentially, before they started the journey, remember what we're really testing are those C's, the 4 C's in particular, and the 5 C's and the 6 C's, if you like, for Saffron. But what it showed is that prior to really starting out their journey, at the early stages of just having met their mentor, what was their, you know, what did they feel about their control? And essentially, they were pretty much 50-50. People felt negative or positive about that. But when we asked them a little later in their journey, after their career recommendations had been put to them, the level of control increased by 15%. Now, remember that that's just without any human intervention at all. And then next, when we looked at confidence levels, and we looked at asking them, you know, how confident are you in finding a new job or changing the work you do? The before and after in terms of positivity was the same, but those that were negative in the first place, that's 64%, you can see that they're beginning to start feeling that there might be a way out. So negativity is starting to be broken down, and we're moving people from not wanting to change to that contemplation stage of thinking about it. Now, from a sort of transformation perspective, that's a really important second stage, that contemplation stage, because then you can prime people for essentially preparing themselves to take action. So when we looked again at the sentiment analysis, so this is the AI chatbot understanding what essentially is the or interpreting the way that people are responding and the kinds of words that they're using, and you know, using NLP to gain that analysis. The things that were worrying people about finding a new job at the beginning was really that lack of opportunities, and also feeling that their age was a major factor against them. But when asked after the career matching had been done whether they would consider changing careers, there was an overwhelming move to looking at becoming career adaptable. So 90% of people felt that they could change their career. Over to you, Ian.
Okay, thank you. So yes, so that was the quantitative analysis, the data that's coming out of it. There's a massive amount more data there, and happy to share those, get into conversations. But yeah, just giving you a quick sort of snapshot of some of the things we were seeing there, particularly in that area of how is the user feeling about it and what benefits are they getting out of the digital experience. Same thing I'm going to cover now is more the qualitative analysis. So this is drawn from those focus groups, the surveys, that in-depth testing that Noorie talked about. So yes, we had those user testing process that we went through, and then we sat down and had interviews with the people to really try and draw out, well, how did they feel about things? And sort of breaking it down by technologies. The AI video work coach, generally very well received. 80% of them feeling that yes, the coach was there and very much supported them as they thought about that career change. 80% finding it very engaging. And I think the use of the video and the audio input at that stage really helped for that as well. Having that conversation with, inverted commas, a real mentor or a real coach at that sort of point as well. And there's a cohesion as well that the video coach gives to that whole process, albeit that it was used slightly differently and to a different extent. So during the initial setup, that initial conversation, I showed you that very quick clip. Yeah, very definitely used at that point to unearth some of the issues, some of the barriers, pointed towards little pieces of training, and then used again at action planning and execution, which kind of makes sense because that's the stage when you've gathered a lot, you've got people moving now, and that's when the coach within the system will actually reach out to people, so giving them behavioural nudges. So lots of activity there. Not used so much within the skills assessment piece, not used so much in the career training, the career and training matching areas. That's either saying it's intuitive or there's some work to do there, and I'm going to come to that a little bit in terms of the development roadmap as well. One of the other pieces of feedback we did get was a diversity, potentially incorporating those with some obvious disabilities and things like that. And you know, we take that on board. I didn't put it up here as such in that how we've always seen it is that there will be further versions, bespoke or specialist versions of this. So that's when you change the coach anyway to more directly fit to whoever it is, your different cohorts. At the moment, we've got a representation, as Noorie showed you the statistics, right across the board. But yeah, that's something that's seen as well as very much as part of bespoke developments when we're working with different people. So that's the work coach, and probably that was the most innovative part of what we were doing. But to cover off the other things, skills assessment, probably the most successful part in truth. People liked it, nice and intuitive. As you say, very high ratings here. Some people are referring to this as their best part of the platform, their favorite part of the platform. So I think that gamified piece there kept people engaged and took them through that skills assessment process that could be a bit laborious, but at least making that much more interactive and engaging there. The career training and job matching places, probably the area that we got the most mixed feedback. And in truth, I'll get to roadmap, probably where we're going to be looking for development primarily. But it was still positive. 60% of people seeing it as a positive experience, 80% rating the functionality very high, the design very high. And I sort of think of it sort of stepping away a little bit. If you think about it, and if you think about the digital experience as opposed to the one-to-one experience, this has got to be an area where digital is going to offer the most value potentially to the user. Noorie shared with you, 90% of people love the fact that it opened up their eyes to potential other careers. And the reality is you just don't have time to do that in one-to-one. So very much in that digital experience here as a main part there. Action planning, loved it again, very highly rated. And I think because we were able to use that sort of wizard approach and incorporate some very tried and tested practices, so setting SMART goals, but able to embed that into the system without really bamboozling people with the theory of it, that was a highly rated, and it's nice to see that that was working well, and particularly because that is going to become one of the biggest engines driving people forward as well. The dashboard, again, very nicely, highly rated. People liked how it looked and felt, being able to access various areas from there. And though we haven't talked about it too much, the training, this was mentioned in this conjunction. So as well as I mentioned the AEB funded training, so the slightly more formal training, we, Saffron, developed a number of other little bite-sized courses. So, you know, CV and cover letter writing, time management, motivation, and those are accessible obviously from the dashboard, but also the mentor themselves will direct people to those. So those seem to have gone down very well. So overall, yeah, I mean, we're pleased. We got some good feedback from it. 80% of people are going to highly likely to recommend to a friend. Nobody, nice to say, nobody would not recommend it or actively dissuade people. So very intuitive, very easy to use. People liking the feel of all of the process, etc. But of course, there's always things and lessons you learn, and we're always constantly looking to develop further from there as well. So in terms of our roadmap that came out of that feedback, the analysis that we'd sort of seen, then there's a number of sort of areas. The reality is, because as I say, we're actually working on some bespoke versions, some more specialist versions. That's always going to influence a little bit where you go with the platform. But we take on board and going to be working on simpler language. We were actually a little bit constrained by the restraints of the CareerTech Challenge program, using those terminology of adequate and competent rather than good, bad, okay, a little bit simpler there. Very definitely CV builder. We're going to want to incorporate that, being able to draw in the data from the skills assessment, draw in information from other areas that's gathered and build out a CV. There's some tweaks on the work coaches. As I say, it's designed anyway to bring in different sort of coaches for different cohorts anyway. And then the career recommendations. So yes, some refining there to do, incorporating live job boards. And indeed, I mentioned actually potentially bringing in Ask Seth, which in truth would potentially actually have good application across the whole of the platform, across the whole of the user journey. Okay, so I'm then going to pass back to Noorie here. We're dovetailing nicely here, aren't we? So passing back to Noorie to really give us a little bit of a wrap up, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, so in terms of conclusions, I think what our pilot study and experience shows is that platforms can do more than just ease administration or just be there in terms of accessibility and reach. It can really be a positive driver for change itself. And the reason that we think that that is possible is that individuals didn't just go through it one time. People are going in it over and over again. So there's active engagement around this. And the fact that, you know, people were feeling confident in applying for jobs as a result of having been through it, putting them in control and giving them agency means that as advisors, as the human advisors, if the digital works together with the human advisors and allows the human advisors to really know when that individual is struggling then we think that the performance outcomes can actually be increased whilst cutting down the costs for providers, and really making sure that those work coaches, the real work coaches, add that real value to an individual to support them through. But allows also for scale, because when the individual is happily plugging their way through the platform and is happy to do so, then they're in control. They're building their digital capabilities and their skills as even going through the journey, and obviously it reduces cost overall as well. So with that, thank you for listening, and we're really happy to answer any questions. But it would be nice maybe to also understand whether, having heard some of that, how do you view digital employment platforms, and whether that kind of journey you see as being important, or something that's replicable within your organisations?
Thank you very much for both of you for the for your presentations. There's one question I can see from Deborah Lloyd. Maybe you can respond to that, and we'll see if other questions come in as you answer.
Sure.
Certainly can. Need to see the question first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry. Go on.
I'm going to stop sharing, then I'll be able to come and join you.
So I think Deborah's asked, as this is funded by the DfE, how does it tie in with the National Career Service Digital Action Plan developments? So it was funded by the DfE. It is no longer funded by the DfE. The DfE wanted us to build it and to pilot it and to learn from essentially the whether we could crack, if you like, a difficult issue. The difficult issue was around career adaptability for, if you like, those that were not close to the labour market. And what we showed is essentially that it is possible to crack that. So it's not currently funded by the DfE, but the way it does tie in with the National Career Service, they are obviously planning their own enhancements. But as you saw, ours actually connected with the National Careers Service itself. And also, this was featured as part of one of their solutions at their recent careers fair. So the Create Your Own Future platform was featured at that fair. So they obviously have their own plans, but they are referring to the platform as well. I hope that answers the question. Benjamin, I think, has said that he loved the insights and found that they were similar as well. So a digital platform can be of use, especially when made easy to navigate.
I'm sure you would say that then as well with your solution. I'm sure Richard would join us in that agreement on that one as well. So
well, I think the challenge we're facing is there's some really good stuff coming out now, but it's just there's a lot out there. I think it's about how one implements. It's about how one links it into other initiatives. It's brilliant that Nesta, the DfE, etc., are finding funding for this. It's bringing about the capability to be here today presenting, saying this is what we've done, ready for the demand that I guess post-furlough many will find.
Yeah, no, that was very definitely as well. I think Noorie sort of covered as well, because obviously the start of the project, the CareerTech Challenge program, predated COVID, and very much because we've recognised for a long time, haven't we, that digital disruption, fourth industrial revolution, whatever you want to call it, is causing issues for people in vulnerable sort of careers. So that was really the background to where it went from. But yeah, then of course COVID hit us, and very much that was seen as an accelerator. We were asked to both broaden the scope of what we were doing, but not also deliver quicker. so very much that was the sort of, yeah, it was an interesting year, I guess, last year, Noorie, wasn't it? I just get to sit back and say, yeah, it looks lovely. But it's an interesting year from that development point of view, getting the platform running there. To put in place exactly what you're sort of saying, Richard, is that we're in such a time of uncertainty and we're still waiting to see things unwind. So yeah, where is this going to be going? Well, okay, we wait to see, don't we? But having some of those technologies in place and that recognition, as you say, Richard, is at least a good thing. At least we're all singing from the same song sheet. Let's just see where it all sort of shakes out a bit. But, yeah.
So John's got a question as well. So saying that online learning can essentially become tedious. So how do you how do you actually get around that? I think that's John's question. Yeah, and that there are some dropout rates. And how have we addressed this? I think clearly learning has to be relevant and engaging, and it has to be interactive. And if you can also personalize the whole experience, then people actually see value in it, and then they do actually come back in again. So as I mentioned, we haven't actually stopped people from continuing use of the platform, and what we've had over the last 60 days is continual re-engagement with the platform. So people are coming back into the platform, they are ticking off their goals, they're doing new learning, etc. So we are actually seeing quite a high take up. So I think a lot of it, as long as it's not click next learning, it's scenario based, it's interactive, people are actually getting adaptive learning or personalized learning, then I think engagement rates remain high. I think Jessica's
copy of the slide. Yes, Jessica. Absolutely. And in fact, I think Molly, our colleague Molly, have just posted it. In fact, is that right? Slides available after download. So there you go, Jessica. In real time, our colleague Molly has given you the answer to that one, where you can find the slides. So that's excellent. Thank you, Molly, and enjoy the slides, Jessica.
I think we've got a few questions on how to implement costs and offline.
Yeah.
So in terms of how do we suggest small providers add digital to their offer, I think you have to work out how as a starting perspective, it might be that you use what we've done already rather than have to amalgamate it. Obviously, into your processes or it wrap around your processes, and you might need to wrap around its processes if that works for you. Just to see, I think, as to in terms of baby steps, whether it's actually workable for you. So I wouldn't spend a lot of money on adapting the kind of thing that we've got. But if you want to use it as it is, and you can wrap your services around it, then there's really quite little that we have to do in terms of, if you like, white labeling it for yourselves. So the costs are relatively low, and there is a license fee model. So if you've got low numbers of users to start with, then it's affordable. What we're wanting to do is obviously make this available to as many people as possible. So fairly low costs in terms of just using, if you like, the product as it is.
There was a question about connectivity. As it stands, yes, it is. You'd call it software as a service or a web-based platform at this moment in time. So yes, it would require that connectivity, Kelly. Definitely something, and I know we've got it on the roadmap, potentially thinking about this. I mean, it's developed with the idea being what you'd sort of call web first development from a visual sort of mobile first from a visual sort of point of view. So yes, it's very much designed that you can actually work it very nicely if you're just on your smartphone or something like that, but strictly speaking, it is an online solution at this moment. Potentially something that could potentially look for develop that as an app as well in the roadmap down the line.
Yeah, so Kelly, you're absolutely right. It does require online to be online, so browser connection. And appreciate, as I talked about in terms of capability, as to whether you have the financial resources and the access to the internet in the first place. When we built this, it was strongly under the premise that individuals would have access to learning centres that were going to be funded by the Trade Union Congress. So it was built in on that premise. So we didn't make an offline version, but it is something that is in our roadmap, because I think you're absolutely alluding to the right point here, that some people may just not have access to funds or the internet. So it is on our roadmap.
Although I would have thought, I mean, one of the challenges for developers is when you go offline, I mean, things like links to other sites, vacancy information, interactivity,
Absolutely.
even multimedia, the very nature of the size of download in the beginning would have to be so large to accommodate all of the possible responses. So there are some hard decisions to be made when contemplating, do we go offline or not? It's not a simple...
It won't necessarily be the same experience, absolutely, but we can have an experience that I think can still benefit those people that require that kind of service.
We're coming up to the half hour, but there's one or two more questions. Well, recording, I believe, yes, that's going to be made available. Integration, have you done any work with CRMs or?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it can integrate with anything essentially that has an API that we can then connect to. Obviously, it also depends on whether you want two-way interoperability or one-way interoperability, but all of those things are available for them. And that's why sort of the integration to job boards and things like that is all all available.
That may refer back a little bit to the earlier question about cost and small, so yes, and as Noorie was sort of saying, you may use it as a bit of a standalone, if only because we don't have those costs, and the cost model is not going to work for you for that integration. But if you're into the bigger pieces, then absolutely, end of the day, there's a lot of data being captured, and so being able to integrate that, passing that into your CRM, your case management system, so it complements that, and maybe only even sections of it being used in more bespoke sort of versions as well, and integrating there. So yeah, it can potentially work within whatever the model you're currently working at. So it's not a question of throwing everything out and starting again. Very definitely not.
Yeah. So Anarchy, we definitely wanted this solution to be used jointly with actual live coaches. So that, as I said, that value add from that live intervention could really happen. So yes, it can be used on its own, but I think it works best as a blended approach, if you like.
Very definitely, yeah.
Well, thank you. We're just virtually at the half hour. Elizabeth, if you're still on there, are you? I think I can see you there, but on mute. I don't know whether you want to say any closing words. Okay. It's busy time. We're what, week one into? Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Was that it? Thank you. Thank you, Liz, as well. Thank you.
Well, I've got a bit more effusive than that.
I've ever heard you speak, Liz.
I've got a feeling it might have been something else that she was dashing to. So I'm just going to say, Noorie, thank you. Ian, thank you. A really interesting presentation. It's always good to hear of other products. And, yes, there's competition, but you know what? We all up our game because of competition. So whether with my Aptem hat on, I look at this and think where there's good ideas, we welcome it and see that as a catalyst to do better, and vice versa. So it's great to see you in the market, and good luck. And thank you for the session.
Excellent.
Thanks, Richard.
Okay, thank you everybody for joining us.
Bye all. Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.